Hello everyone, and welcome to this presentation here, which as you can see from this cover slide, is on communication and the coach. And this is the first of three presentations that I've prepared for you on the important role that communication plays in the work that we do as life coaches. So I hope you find the work that we're about to do on this particular topic of benefit to you. But this first presentation, Communication and the Coach 1, is subtitled, We Cannot Not Communicate. And I'd like to start with this interesting quote here from the personal development coach, mentor and author, professional speaker, Brian Tracy. And it's an interesting quote. And he says, your ability to negotiate, communicate, influence, and persuade others to do things is absolutely indispensable to everything you accomplish in life. The most effective men and women in every area are those who can quite competently organize the cooperation and assistance of other people towards the accomplishment of goals and objectives. So that's a very interesting way of summing up the important role that communication plays in the work that we do as coaches. It's our job as life coaches to competently work with our clients cooperatively so that we can assist them in the achievement of their goals, ambitions, and objectives. So the content of this particular presentation is in four parts. We're going to start by looking at this idea that we cannot not communicate. We're communicating all the time, whether we're aware of it or not. Then I'd like to move on to talk about the important role that effective speaking plays in coaching. Then just to have a general exploration of communication and the coach, and then we will complete by looking more specifically at the role of questioning and explaining. The learning outcomes, so by the end of this particular presentation, you will be able to identify and appreciate what constitutes effective communication skills and the role these play in the work that we do as life coaches, but also to describe and apply effective communication skills in the work that you do as life coaches. So to start off with, as I was saying, we cannot not communicate. Even when we think we are not saying anything, we are saying something. Knowing the complexities of communication and how to use communication skills effectively in the work we do is of critical importance to us as professional helpers. It underpins the work, it underpins everything we do really as coaches. So this presentation begins the process of exploring the role communication plays in our lives personally and professionally, what it is, and how to use communication effectively in the work that we do as life coaches. Effective communication clearly involves speech. How speech can be used to initiate and develop effective change and development in others, as well as ourselves. Verbal communication, though significant, is only part of the process. What we communicate non-verbally is also hugely important. In this presentation, we will explore the importance of verbal communication, the importance of and the power to be found in non-verbal communication, including a range of related non-verbal skills such as empathy, rapport, and the value to be found in empathy, rapport building, and active listening. Well, these particular non-verbal skills will be explored in the second of our discussions on communication and the coach. So let's start. We cannot not communicate. It goes without saying that any professional who is concerned with bringing about powerful, lasting change within others would benefit from being a skilled and effective communicator. Whoever instigates and facilitates the process of change, whether it be a teacher, a trainer, a therapist, a counselor, or life coach, will need to be an effective communicator. It could be easily assumed that people either are or are not effective at communicating, that a person is a natural-born leader or a natural-born speaker, that you've either got it or not. But nothing could be further from the truth. That said, there is some truth in the notion that all humans are, at birth, natural-born influences. Newborn babies are, for example, brilliant influences. Babies have the innate ability to bring out the adult's natural feelings of love, care, and protectiveness. They need to do that because their survival depends on their ability to influence us to want to look after them, because they can't look after themselves. Human babies are extraordinary in their helplessness, and they remain helpless for actually quite a long time compared to other living creatures on this planet. But this ability that babies have to bring out our natural care and concern for them is really quite extraordinary. I mean, who, after all, can't resist a smiling baby's face? The sense of connectedness that exists between a baby and an adult is nevertheless instinctive. It's innate. It isn't an interchange that is constructed with deliberate intent. It's natural, it's normal, it's innate. As we grow, however, we may lose the natural ability we once had to communicate with influence. We may need, in other words, to revisit the process of communication. We may need to revisit and learn once more how to be powerfully influential in how we communicate and relate to others. As we grow and develop, we will learn to develop and master a number of skills and competencies associated with effective communication. We will learn, for example, to speak, to write, and to form relationships with others. And we will learn to develop these competencies rather well, or maybe not. Either way, we can all learn to improve our communication skills should we wish to do so. So communication is a vital part of our lives, but what exactly is communication? What are we talking about when we talk about communication? So the first thing to bear in mind is that communication is something we all engage with all the time. We cannot not communicate. Everything we do, whether we do it well or not, is communicative. Everything we do has an impact, not only on other people, but on ourselves. Everything we do is impactful, whether we're aware of it or not. So it's worth reflecting, therefore, upon our competency as communicators. And it is worthwhile putting in some effort into improving our skills in this area should we wish to do so, or should we need to do so. We all know what communication is, more or less, though it remains an elusive concept to define in any simple or meaningful way. What exactly are we talking about when we talk about communication? We kind of know what it is, but what is it really? A simple dictionary definition would say that communication is the imparting or exchange of information and ideas by means such as writing or speaking. This information, more often than not, will be mediated through some form of cultural product, such as a computer, a mobile phone. Film, radio, TV, and the internet could all be said to be effective means of communication. Either way, communication is literally the sharing of ideas. The sharing of ideas. That's communication in a nutshell. The word communication originates in the Old French, communication, from the Latin communicare, meaning to share. This is a useful starting point, but it fails to capture the full complexity and significance of communication. But it is a good place to start, the sharing of ideas. Communication and the sharing of ideas and information remains a vital part of our lives. This ability of ours to share ideas and information is absolutely critical to us as human beings. As Scales says, communication is the glue that holds societies together, that holds communities together, that holds the whole world together. It makes connections and interactions between people possible. Communication makes connections and interactions between people possible. It would be virtually impossible for us to do anything without communication. Through communication, we make our needs, wants, and desires known. We use our communication skills to build and develop our relationships. Our primary aim as life coaches is to help facilitate powerful change in other people. And we do this through our ability to communicate and to communicate effectively. So let's move on to effective speaking. So the role speaking plays within effective communication is so evident that it would be easy to take it for granted. And yet learning to speak effectively is a skill we would all benefit paying attention to. As professional helpers, we need to ensure that the message we are seeking to communicate has been understood, and how we speak plays a vital role in our ability to do this. Our speech needs, for example, to have structure. We need to ensure that what we are presenting to the client in the form of verbal information is being presented in a logical, well-organized manner. This within itself will help avoid vagueness, ambiguity, and misunderstanding. We need to think about how the textual information we create will be perceived and understood by others. We tend to write in a manner that is considerably more structured and purposeful than how we think, or indeed how we speak. When we are writing, we employ sentence structure, paragraphs, and other devices such as bullet points to break up the layout of the text to make it more visibly acceptable, for example. But we can do this with our speech as well. Speech also needs to have structure. We need to be able to express ourselves with clarity. Our effectiveness as speakers isn't about impressing others regarding what we know. It's about helping others to learn effectively. It's also important to consider the quality of our voice, its volume, pitch, timbre, intonation, and rhythm. Being able to vary the speed at which we speak, how we use pauses and periods of silence, how we stress key words by leaning on key words. They're all examples of how we can use our voice effectively. Much of what is captured in the effectiveness of our communication, particularly in terms of how we use our voice, is related to the quality of the discourse we generate, how successful we are in using effective questioning skills, how we encourage others to talk, how we explain concepts, and so on, are all representative of the effectiveness that we have in our ability to communicate. So moving on now to communication and the coach. So those intending to go through the process of personal change and development need the skills and resources needed to do so. They also need to know how to use these skills and these resources. They need, in other words, to know how to change. So we've talked about this before. With regards to our clients' motivation, we know that they want to change. Clearly, that's important, but they also need to know how to change. Our clients, in other words, need to be expert learners. We don't just need to be expert coaches. Our clients need to be expert learners. They need to be expert clients. Our clients need to be experts in knowing how to change. Coaching as a very specific educative process, I would argue, is particularly well placed in terms of its ability to facilitate learning to learn strategies. So it's not just a question of our ability to communicate effectively with the client. It's about their ability to communicate effectively with us, making their needs known to us effectively, then being able to explain what's going on for them and talking to us about what it is they need to do to change. It's not just a question of our ability to communicate effectively with them. They need to be able to communicate effectively with us, because coaching is a collaborative two-way process. And I think this is something that's quite often underestimated, the importance of expert client characteristics. So firstly, coaching tends to take place on a one-to-one basis. So these are some of the skills that our clients learn to appreciate and develop. They learn to understand that coaching takes place on a one-to-one basis. This as an approach is ideal, as it enables the coach to focus on the specific learning needs of the client. Working one-on-one with the client allows us to focus on their particular needs. And the fact that they're working one-on-one with us enables them to make their needs known to us. Secondly, coaching tends to last for a short period of time. So it's empowering in that respect, because the client kind of knows that they're going to feel empowered within a very short period of time. And that within itself is quite motivating, knowing that this isn't going to take months or years. The process is also specific in that it has specific goals in mind for the client to achieve. And those goals will be achieved within a specific time frame. This is empowering. This structure, this positive emphasis on the client's ability to learn and to improve quickly is empowering. Completing the process as soon as possible is also a critical part of the process. Thirdly, coaching is about improving performance and the achievement of specific skills and competencies. Fourthly, coaching encourages the client to critically evaluate their personal performance and to seek out what is needed to improve. And fifthly, coaching is essentially a non-directive process, a non-directive approach. The coach doesn't tell the client what to do. The coach supports the client in their personal determination and willingness to change. And finally, the basis of coaching is about effective questioning, explaining efficiently and effectively, discussing issues expertly, and last but not least, it's about giving and receiving feedback. So all of these qualities, all of these strategies which lie at the heart of effective life coaching are all examples of effective communication. We can't do anything with our clients effectively without being skilled at communicating and relating to them. Coaching is similar to, but not the same as mentoring. So I've talked about this before, but again, this is interesting to reflect upon once more. A mentor, as you know, is somebody who is considered to have more knowledge and experience than the mentee. And as such, the mentee learns from their mentor. Within the workplace, for example, a knowledgeable, experienced, well-respected member of staff may be asked to mentor a rookie, somebody who has just joined the organization, somebody who is inexperienced. In this particular case, the mentee is understood to learn from their mentor. Still a very powerful form of learning. A coach doesn't necessarily have more experience than the person they are coaching. The successful sports coach may be hugely successful, say, in coaching athletics. For example, they may coach some of the best athletes in the world, despite the fact that they may not actually be able to do what their client is able to do. So, for example, in athletics, you might have an absolutely brilliant coach, somebody who's coaching a runner to achieve world-class status, and yet that coach might not be able to run at all. But that's okay. because they're brilliant at coaching. They don't have to be brilliant at running. They're hired to be an expert coach. So how are coaches able to be successful if this is the case? The key lies in how coaches approach the work they do. To start with, coaching is understood to be a process. It is more specifically a process whereby one person, the coach, works alongside another, the client, guiding that client towards the realization of their potential. The individual in this particular case is understood to learn with the coach. With regards to the work we do, our clients learn with us. They learn alongside us. So actually, it's our ability to communicate effectively with them that makes all the difference in the world. The process often works from the premise that the client has a tremendous amount of untapped, unrealized potential. Coaching helps the client realize, release, and develop this potential. The achievement of potential is understood in this sense to come from a position of personal empowerment. So this is what the coach is focusing on, their ability to get the very best out of their client. And they do that through being skilled at communication. Telling people what to do and how to do it has a tendency to encourage learned helplessness, as the individual comes to rely entirely on the other person taking the initiative and leading the way forward. So telling somebody what to do, that's a form of communication, but it's not an empowering form of communication. It is, in fact, the opposite. Telling somebody what to do disempowers them. So the expert coaching communication skills that we're talking about does exactly the opposite. Coaching, when done really well, does exactly the opposite of telling people what to do. Expert coaches encourage their clients to take ownership of their performance, to take ownership of their thoughts, their feelings, to take ownership of their actions and the results they get. The client learns to take responsibility for themselves and the results they get. And we're doing that through our communication. And this in turn empowers the client to believe in their ability to change, to learn, to improve, to believe that they can achieve and accomplish their goals with the minimum amount of help, support, and guidance from us or anybody else for that matter. That's empowering. So communication can either empower or belittle. It can either inspire or demotivate. And this is why questioning is so important. And this is why questioning plays such an important role in coaching. As a communicative strategy, effective questioning is critical, asking powerful questions. And it's not just about our ability as coaches to ask powerful questions. It's also the client's ability to ask powerful questions of us and to ask powerful questions of themselves. Because asking powerful questions, it encourages the client to think for themselves, to find solutions to the problems they face. This in turn leads to the ability to self-coach. And this, as you know, is one of the reasons why coaching is historically a short-term intervention, because what lies at the heart of the work we do is our ability to encourage the client to coach themselves. That's the ultimate goal of coaching, self-coaching. The ultimate goal of coaching is to be able to empower the client to facilitate for themselves their development. As John Whitmore says, telling or asking closed questions saves people from having to think. Asking open questions causes them to think for themselves. A coach, as we have already seen, may not have the skills, competencies, or experience of the person they are coaching, but they can do their job efficiently and effectively through the utilization of a very different but very specific set of skills. These skills are centered mainly around advanced communication skills including excellent skills in questioning and explaining. A mentor, when asked to help, may give advice and guidance. A coach, by comparison, may say something along the lines of, what do you want to achieve? What difficulties are you facing? What options are open to you? What resources do you have to help yourself? What difficulties do you see for yourself? It's a completely different approach, asking questions rather than giving advice and guidance, empowering the client to think for themselves, which takes us on to questioning and explaining. Questioning and explaining are amongst the most important communication skills a professional helper needs to have. They are of fundamental importance in creating deep, significant learning, the learning that encourages personal empowerment and self-responsibility. Good learning, as Claxton says, starts with questions, not answers. Asking good questions is the basis for becoming a successful learner. A successful client needs to be an effective learner. So it's worthwhile putting some effort into developing effective skills in questioning and explaining. If people aren't asked powerful questions, they're being spoon-fed. And spoon-feeding, as E.M. Forster said, teaches us nothing but the shape of the spoon. So basically, telling people what to think, well, that's spoon-feeding. And spoon-feeding teaches us nothing but the shape of the spoon. Telling people what to think and do can get results, to be fair, but the results tend to be somewhat shallow and superficial. The client might have got the results, but they don't know how. Asking questions enables people to develop the skills they need to be self-determined, to take responsibility, not only to achieve the results they want, but to know how they've achieved them. Asking questions is important, but not all questions are equally valid. There is, of course, a place for all sorts of questions, from simple questions used to put the client at ease, to building rapport, developing the right kind of atmosphere, in contrast to questions encouraged to provoke deep thought and the solution to problems. So there's lots of different types of open questions, or questioning in general, which work on very varying levels, all of which can be of benefit. There are, in this sense, different levels of questioning. Some questions may be open and some may be closed. Some can be used to seek clarification, while others are used to probe for further information and understanding. Questions can be used to establish and reinforce knowledge, while others can be used to encourage the client to explore different alternative perspectives, different points of view. So there's different types of questions and different levels of questioning. Generally speaking, questioning serves a number of purposes. Questioning can be used to assess any difficulties the client may have. It can be used to gain the attention of the client, and it's a good way of checking for learning and understanding. Questioning can also encourage independence of thought. We can use questioning to test knowledge and understanding, to explore and find out whether there are any errors or misconceptions in the client's understanding, checking for learning, checking for misunderstandings. Questioning can be used to recap and revise what has already been learned and set up the possibility of solving problems. Questioning can motivate and inspire. Questioning can build self-belief and confidence. Questioning can be used to initiate a meaningful conversation. Questioning can be used to help develop excellent skills in problem solving. So all in all, questioning is a very important part of the work we do. There are a number of important skills that can be developed when questioning. First of all, we can try and encourage the development of an environment in which the client feels safe, psychologically and emotionally. A client who feels relaxed is far more likely to engage in a meaningful conversation as they answer the questions asked of them. This in turn will encourage the client to ask questions of us, which is also important. Questioning can be used when focusing on asking questions. We can focus on asking questions with clarity, try to avoid vagueness as we do so, making sure that we are asking questions with clarity, that we are avoiding vagueness or ambiguity, and that we're making sure that we don't use long, unnecessarily complicated sentences when questioning. We can try to ensure that the language we use is appropriate and easy to understand, that questions are not too easy, but then again, not too difficult either. So do bear in mind also that thought-provoking questions, do bear this in mind. This is an important point. Thought-provoking questions may require contemplation. If you ask quite a profound or really interesting and significant question, the client may need some time to think about the answer. So don't be afraid to allow them the time they need to answer the question. Tolerate the silence, it's okay. Giving people time to think is important when questioning. Using questioning sequentially is important as well. So when we're questioning, use our questioning sequentially, with one question leading logically onto another. We also need to pace our speech when questioning, paying attention, as I said earlier, to pitch, rhythm, tone, speed of voice. Acknowledge the client's response and then respond to that in a meaningful way, using their response as part of the process of creating and establishing a meaningful dialogue. Explaining is another skill professional helpers need to focus on, and like questioning, there is more to it than people tend to think. In other words, explaining, like questioning, is something that is easy to take for granted. It could be assumed that explaining is simply a question of sharing some information we have with somebody who doesn't have that information. Questioning, as we have seen, is not a simple process, and we can use questioning either effectively and efficiently or not. Through effective questioning alone, a fairly straightforward conversation can be turned into a meaningful, thought-provoking coaching session. And this is also the case with explaining. Something can be explained well or not. Explaining, when done poorly, can lead to frustration, annoyance, and a sense of hopelessness. Explaining, when done well, can be exciting, motivational, and inspirational. Explaining, in this sense, should involve more than simply sharing information with others. It can involve discussion, dialogue, debate. Explaining is a semantic process in this sense. It's about making sense of information. It involves the formation of meaning. Explaining is closely linked to effective questioning in this sense, because it involves interpretation. The interpretation and explanations. It involves descriptive explanation, reason-giving explanations. Interpretive explanations are closely linked to what type questions. What do you know now that you didn't know at the beginning of this session? Descriptive explanations involve processes and procedures. They are concerned primarily with how things work, and as such are well suited to demonstrations, how we might demonstrate something that we would like our client to do, for example. When explaining a concept, certain how questions may be a good starting point, such as, how might you make this easier for yourself? How might you make this easier for yourself? Reason-giving explanation involves finding out how things are done. They are closely linked to why questions. When explaining a concept, why questions may be a good starting point, although why questions need to be handled with care. To avoid this, the word because can be introduced, such as this might happen because. So providing a good explanation can be enhanced through following a number of suggestions. Make sure you understand the presenting issue yourself. As the saying goes, if we can't explain something clearly to others, then we can't possibly understand it ourselves. Simplicity is also a worthwhile goal. Simplicity. Explanations also need to be well planned, well organized, and to have structure and purpose to them. Linking one explanation to another can also help provide meaning. Explanations need to be introduced in such a way as to engage the client. This is important. Explanations need to be introduced in such a way as to engage the client. This in turn will help the client to link new experiences to experiences they already have, which in turn will enable the client to find the meaning they need in order to make sense of the explanation. As with questioning, it's important when offering an explanation to avoid information overload. It's critically important that the client gets clarity on what is being explained to them. Complex concepts can be broken down into smaller chunks and illustrated through the use of diagrams, props, and other resources. So do think about that as well if you're explaining something, or working through a complex concept with your client, how you might use a diagram, an illustration, a prop, just something to help them to get clarity on what it is you're exploring together. So in summary, we cannot not communicate. Communication, though a natural part of our lives, is a skill that can be learned and developed. Communication, though a natural part of our lives, although it's something we all do naturally, it's also a skill that can be developed and enhanced. We can get better. Communication is something we all engage with all the time. Everything we do has an impact. So it's worth reflecting, therefore, upon our competency as communicators. And it's worthwhile putting in some effort to improving our communication skills, to think about what aspects of our ability to communicate can be improved upon. Effective communication is literally the sharing of ideas. We need to get things done through communicating. We get things done through communicating. It would be virtually impossible for us to do anything without communication. Through communication, we make our needs, our wants, and our desires known. We use our communication skills to build and develop our relationships. Our primary aim as life coaches is to help facilitate powerful change in others. And we do this through our ability to communicate and to communicate effectively. Effective communication isn't simply the transmission of information from one person to another. It's a dynamic process involving meaningful human interactivity. But there are, it's worth bearing in mind, potential barriers to communication. We need to be aware of this, what barriers might exist between our ability to communicate effectively with our clients. These barriers may be physical, they may be semantic, they may be psychological, but there may be some barriers. Something might get in the way that stops us communicating effectively with our client, and we need to be aware of that. We need to consider how we sound, how we are using our voice, for example. We also need to reflect upon and be aware of how our client is communicating back to us, and maybe also to themselves. Effective communication plays a vital role in the process of professional change work, including consultancy, mentoring, therapy, training, as well as coaching. Effective communication lies at the heart of effective life coaching. The client learns with the coach, not so much from them. Coaching encourages self-determination and the independence of thought. Coaching involves a number of effective communication skills, such as effective questioning and explaining. So I hope you found that interesting and beneficial. That's started the process of an in-depth exploration on the importance of communication skills and the important role that communication plays in the work that we do. So thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to exploring this very, very important topic with you in due course. So thanks very much, folks, and I look forward to discussing this with you soon. Bye-bye.